And there, in a nutshell, is the best piece of advice anyone ever gave me in this hobby, that everything is a compromise. Even the most proficient modeler cannot make perfection in scale form. They can get close, some of them, but I've learned the hard way that compromise, it makes the hobby more enjoyable than perfection. And here is a 4mm scale, double O gauge British coach, running on 16.5mm HO track. The reason why double O gauge became the predominant scale in the UK and Ireland was to do with early manufacturers of steam locomotives were unable to get motors inside HO scale versions of British models when they were first coming out. So they compromised, because of the loading gauge of the real thing, they compromised with a larger 4mm to the foot scale. Here is a British 3.5 accurate HO model of the same type of coach, and you can see how much more petite it is. It almost looks like TT. And here is what we're going to work on next. This was inspired by a video on Railway 187's channel where he had converted some of these to HO, and I'm going to have a go at this myself. These were a Triang that came in a set back in the early 1960s that was only this length. They weren't short coaches that Triang had in the early days, or made with better plastic. And they're not full-scale coaches like the ones in below. So it's double O gauge-ish. They've also got smaller windows. So they're probably, if we push the envelope here, not be too pedantic and keep into the world of artistic license, we may be able to get it to look something that doesn't look too outrageous compared to the HO1 at the bottom. The reason for this is the windows, most of them are not too much bigger than the HO version. It's almost the same length. So there is a possibility to visually, if not physically, compress it. The height of the windows on these Triang coaches is 12.27mm. The scale height on the Lima HO coaches is 10.92mm. Some millimetre or so out, not fully 2mm. The width on the Triang compromise coach, we'll call them, is 13.8. On the Lima, it's 12.6, much closer. So there is not the same visual impact of giant windows. Now you can see in the background there, the Triang coach is significantly taller. And here, the difference really comes out. And end to end, you can see the difference is quite spectacular. However, if you look at certain parts of this model, we could drop them down without too much work and also create another kind of visual trick, possibly to paint the black area that's currently red on the Triang coach below the tumble home black. Now, this will involve somehow reducing the height of these Triang wheel sets on the bogies. These are really difficult models to work on. They're really difficult bogies to remove. 187, what he did was he put smaller wheels in. Now, but these are really tricky because you can see in this where the axle is, there's a huge journal box, and you've got to create some kind of housing or a socket for smaller wheels to fit into, preferably moving them towards the top of the journal box. That will reduce the height, not only the diameter of the wheel, but also its distance from the top of the actual bogie itself, as well as possibly reducing the height of the plastic in the body above the bogie. This will probably take some creative work to bring it down to that height. But it's not impossible, it'll just be tricky. And here's the awful Triang bogies. They really are terrible. Those wheels will remove them and will replace them, and they're terrible. They're impossible to remove by tools. They're just a very difficult design to work with, so I'm going to keep those Triang bogies. So this will be the next project in the HO project, overall project, is to try and get these Triang early 1960s train set coaches. I don't believe they were ever available in the regular range, and they're very inexpensive. You can pick them up quite cheap now because serious modelers don't want them. Just like 187, I'd like to try the same thing again in my own way. I think that we can, using the 3-foot rule, we can actually make these look fairly acceptable behind a HO locomotive. Okay, I'm off to the workbench.